welcome to class Food Safety and Environmental Sustainability, and today we will talk about food safety and environmental contaminants. This lecture will be guided with me. I am Risanti Situmorang. I am an assistant professor in Department of Nutrition in Universitas Sumatera Utara, Medan, Indonesia. So there will be three things that we will discussing together today. That the aims of this lecture is the first one, to understand what is the sources and the types of environmental contaminants. And the second one is to understand the pathways through which these contaminants enter the food chain. And the last one will be to understand the health risks posed by the environmental contaminants in food. Well, when we are talking about food safety, we are considering about what is actually safe. Safe is something that expected by everyone. Everyone wants to be safe, want to be safe from risk, want to be safe from danger, safe from contamination, and of course, safe for health. So that's why talking about food safety is very essential and very important. When we comes to talk about food safety, we are remembering some of the cases that has happened in the worldwide, that there was a crisis caused in some parts of the world. If we can see the map here, we see that there was a Swiss milk crisis in New York, USA by the time 1850. So it's already start around 1880s era. And then there was Ising Bakery incident in Hong Kong, followed by arsenic contaminated beer sugar contamination in London, and then bread poisoning in South Africa. And also we are familiar with the Minamata illness that happened in Japan around 1950. And also we have maybe we heard about epidemic dropsy triggered by adulterate mustard oil in Delhi, that we know that Indian people really like to use mustard oil. And then some of the cases also happen in my country from Indonesia. That happened is just maybe 6 years ago in Indonesia. That's happened from dioxin contamination that's found in eggs that is located in Tropodo, Indonesia. You may wonder, what about your country? What about maybe Taiwan, right? So there was a Taiwan food scandal in 2011 that the Food and Drug Administration of Taiwan found that they use DEHP or D2-ethylhexyl salate and also D-isononyl salate DINP as a clouding agents. What is clouding agents? So they use these clouding agents to make some of the food and beverage look more natural. So the characteristic of the food look like the original one. So from 965 products at that time were found contaminated, where 2006 were exported to 22 countries. That's why since that time the chemical salad, or usually used as pesticides, were researched by many scientists. Well, when we talk about food safety and environmental contaminants, there was a study just recently published that talks about preventing chemical contaminants in food, how is the challenges and prospects for safe and sustainable food production. So as you can see in the slide, we see that there are some of the categories that they found. The first one is mycotoxins. And the type of the chemical contaminants is aflatoxin, deoxynivalenol, ochratoxin, fumosines, and zearalenone. And they found that all these chemical contaminant found in groundnut oil, in the wheat and barley. Also, they found it in wheat flour, maize, and of course, there is an impact of these chemicals. So this mycotoxin lead to many kind of disease such as immunodeficiency, liver damage, acute toxicity, carcinogenicity, impaired growth effect, and so on. So there's a lot of kind of disease that's caused by these mycotoxins. And the second category is antimicrobials. That is the chemical contaminants such as sulfonamides and also macrolides that is may cause some of the kidney damage and nephropathy, hypersensitivity, and also anaphylactic shock. The third one is about polychlorinated biphenyls and dioxin that they found in even baby food, so it's very dangerous. And these microchlorinated biphenyls and dioxins that they found in the baby food may cause to the language delay, or we are familiar with the terms speech delay, that the babies cannot speak at on time. And metals, the another categories is metals, that is lead, mercury, that usually they found in grains and vegetables, and we know that there's contaminated food that content of lead and mercury may cause death among children, also complication in the red blood cells and also nervous system. And not only that, mercury contaminated in food, that the found in food, it may cause some of developmental toxicity and also associated with reproductive health. And the next one is polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and usually it's found in the barbecue food. You know, people very like to eat barbecue, and they found that there was benzopiran in the barbecue food that may cause cognitive dysfunction among children and impaired male fertility, DNA damage, and oxidative stress, mutagenicity, and also carcinogenicity. That's why I want to remind you that environmental contaminants is very serious, because it can cause many kinds of problems from children until adult. Also, the type of the disease is very wide. You know that it may cause death evenly. And what is the reason chemical food safety issues that many researchers think recently or very concerned about? The issue is talking about the fipronil contamination of eggs in Europe, and also there are dioxin contamination of eggs in Tropodo, Indonesia. That's one in my country, and also ethylene oxide contaminated sesame seeds in Europe, and boric acid contaminated corn noodles in Tennessee in China, and also plastic contamination in butterball turkey products. Okay, so we already know what is the why we have to concern about food safety. We already know that we have to concern about whether the food is safe from risk, safe from danger, safe from contaminants, in order to what? In order to make sure, in order to ensure that this food is safe for health, because we know once the contamination happen, it may cause too many kinds of disease. So we have to keep in mind that food safety is very important. Now we are going to the second part of this lecture. We're talking about environmental contaminants. What do you think about environmental contaminants? Of course, when we talk about contaminants, we talk about something harmful, right? So environmental contaminants is the harmful substances that release into the environment that can contaminate food. So when we can find these environmental contaminants? the environmental contaminants may comes from industry, from burning or incineration, also from cigarette smoke, from automobile exhaust, from natural occurrence or geologic sources, or from commercial products. So if we can see, environmental contaminants is very ubiquitous. What is ubiquitous? Ubiquitous meaning it comes from everywhere. It comes from everywhere and exists in everywhere. So environmental contaminants enter the food chain through air, water, soil, that posing risk to the food safety. Environmental contaminants can be present in foods because they are exist in the soil, water, or where the foods are ground, raised, or processed. And the most common mediums contaminated by chemicals that affecting the food industry are the water. There's a lot of study that found that there's a lot of microplastic found in the water, and when the microplastic exists in the water, of course all the fish, and then the seafood and others, they will be contaminated with the contaminants itself or the microplastic. And this called as direct contamination due to their anthropogenic activities. So the second objectives of this study, we would like to talk about how is the pathways to the food contamination. Of course, when we talk about the pathways, it may comes from the upstream to the downstream, right? So it started with the production of the raw materials, or maybe if we want to see from the origin, it means the pathways of the food contamination comes from the harvesting. Okay, after the harvesting, we will consider about the transportation of the raw materials. After that, the food will be processed, and there will be a pathways, that is, the food will be contaminated with this food processing. After food processing, it may come to the food packaging, and then followed by transportation of packaged food. After that, storage and distribution, and then food preparation at consumer level, and followed by food disposal, and the last one, the assimilation of contaminants into the environment. So talking about the food contamination, we cannot only focus on only one step of the whole process of the food contamination. We have to consider from the upstream to the downstream, or from the downstream to the upstream. Why? Because there will be a possibility that the contamination happen in each step. So that's why we are really concerned about step by step of the food contamination. That's why we will discussing about this in HACCP, or in the hazard analysis critical control point, because we have to very concerned about each step of the process in making some of the products, food products. Well, I already mentioned about the pathways. So there will be different kinds of contaminants when we talk about each step. So the possibility, if we're talking about the growing process, or maybe when we talk about the harvesting, there will be a possible contaminants such as toxin chemicals like arsenic, and from the environment. And also when we talk about the processing, there will be a Maillard reaction products such as carboxymethylation. And when we talk about packaging or storage, there will be metallic ions such as pesticides. As we know, there are there's a lot of kind of food packaging made by plastic, right? So most of the food packaging made by plastic. That's why the possible contaminants in packaging or storage mostly comes from plasticizers such as I mentioned before, maybe BPA or salad that we will discussing later. And then in the transportation step, there will be contaminants such as the gasoline, diesel from the vehicle emissions. Okay, we will see one by one of the pathways. In the transportation, food can be contaminated during transportation as a result of both diesel and petrol engine that comes from the vehicles through exhaust system that emit excessive carbon monoxide. And the contaminants can settle on the packaging material or directly on the food. So the most commonly checked gases for permeation on packaging material are oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. And the another sources of contaminants, of environmental contaminants, is cleaning agents. Disinfectants and most cleaning agents contain harmful compounds that have a pungent smell and corrosive properties. Notwithstanding their role in the deep cleaning of surfaces and the environment at large, they can easily be introduced into food through mishandling and unsafe practice, leading to residual toxicity. So when we talk about cleaning agents, we will talk about how is the good manufacturing practice or GMP should be conducted. So I don't think that cleaning agents will be a very serious issue if in one industry or in a food production the good manufacturing practice run well. So I don't think cleaning agents will be a very serious problem, because in good manufacturing practice we will very have a very strong concern about how to conduct it, the cleaning agent, disinfectant, and so on. Well, another kind of the contaminants also may comes from food additives. That is, food additives represent some of the innovation that is introduced in the food industry to usually to alleviate the waste and prolong the shelf life of the foodstuff. And we know that if we can see in the slide, we see that there's a lot of kinds of food additives that usually used in the food industry, such as acidity regulator, antioxidant, carrier, emulsifier, flavor enhancer. Should we avoid the food additives? I don't think so, because we know that in food technology we always talk about the importance of the food additives, right? But it's a very essential to keep in mind that how to limit the food additives and how to use it in the right way, right? And then another thing is talking about the food packaging. Food packaging is the most contaminants, the source of the contaminants, such as food contact materials that can release migrating to the substance. And we know that the food contact materials are reportedly the leading source of chemical contamination in food and significantly contribute to chronic chemical exposure. Migration of contaminants into foodstuff depends on factors such as what is the composition of the materials, and then how is the package size, whether it's big or small, and then the temperature use, is it used in the microwave maybe, or maybe used for the hot water. So we have to concern about the temperature, and also the storage time, how long, and the nature of the food and how it is exposed. So actually there is some factors that may affect the migration of the plasticizers or food packaging into the food itself. So if we see kinds of the packaging type, it could be a paper, or it could be a paperboard, it could be a metals, or most of the time we will use plastic. There was a study that they conducted the type of the food, the packaging type, and the contamination pathways. The paperboard that they found in rice, usually the contamination pathways comes from adhesive, coatings, and also inks. And for the maize, usually covered with paper, they found that the contamination pathways comes from migration, moistures, and also inks. And for the meat and fish that is packaged with polystyrene and corrugated fiber board, they found that the contamination pathways comes from moisture in the humid areas. What about the sugar? Sugar that packaged in the paper or in the paperboard, they found that the sugar contaminated by the absorption of moisture and the chemicals. And for the raw and processed fruits and vegetables, that is usually stored in the polystyrene, metals, vegetable parchment paper, or molded pulp packaging, they found that the contamination pathways is come from moisture absorption and migration. What about dairy, like milk, cheese, dairy products that stored in polystyrene, plastics, metals, and folding cartons? They found that most of the contamination pathways comes from migration and leaching chemicals. And for the bakery, the packaging type is polystyrene and greaseproof paper. The contamination pathways is from the moisture absorption. And the beverage that is usually packaged or stored in metals, like maybe in the cans and also foil wraps, the contamination pathways comes from migration of bisphenol A and blackening, corrosion, bulging, thin dissolution, and also leaching coatings. So from this slide, we can see that different type of packaging will have different type of contamination pathways too. Well, when we talk about environmental contaminants, the first one that pop ups, maybe we will think about the persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. POPs are toxic, long-lasting chemicals that is persist in the environment, that is accumulate in the food chain and can travel long distance, posing risk to the human environmental health. The researchers found that people are exposed through their dietary intake of animal products, and their exposure can be worsened by the ingestion of fruits and vegetables that is contaminated by the pesticides. So that's why when we talk about the POPs, persistent organic pollutants, there will be four main characteristics. The first one is persistence, and the second one is long range transport. That's why, because they are persistent and long range transports, that's why the third characteristic is they can bioaccumulate it in the nature, and also they can have the biomagnification. And the last one, the persistent organic pollutants, supposed to be toxic. So besides they are persistent bioaccumulation, they are also harmful for the human or even for the animal. Well, the next one we talk about pesticides. Okay, when we talk about pesticides, pesticides are widely used by all the countries, right? Pesticides are very used globally to their benefits in controlling the manifestation of the pests, and they can be applied throughout the food production chain, like farm productions and then storage, transportation, distribution, processing, and at the consumer level. Daily consumption of food comes with potential daily exposure to pesticides that most countries have predetermined maximum permissible limits. Actually, for the use of the pesticides, each country limits by the government through the regulation under Food Agriculture Organization or World Health Organization, or maybe Codex Alimentarius. And why this pesticides issue is very important, uh, we see that the pesticide contamination in food and the number of output per year is increasing year per year. If we see in 2020, there are more 140 published paper that is studied in 2020. So the number of um, the num the number of publication is increasing from year to year. Okay, so what is the summary of the classification of pesticides and human health effects? The first one, the DDT, that is organochlorine. The root usually comes from ingestion or inhalation. They may cause Parkinson's disease and also neurotoxic effects. And the next one is hexachlorocyclohexane or organochlorine. They usually comes from the contaminated food, that is may cause the birth defect in the humans. And then also there is benzene hexachloride, that is also organophosphate, that it comes from the injection of loose control that may cause liver disease and so on. And also there are from injection too, like malathion, that is cause neurologic toxic effects. So pesticides also is the source of the contamination. There is a maximum levels for selected pesticide that may be present in the foodstuff as per the Codex Alimentarius International Food Standards. We see that the abamectin, the pesticide, in the citrus fruits, the maximum residual levels is around 0.02 milligram per kg. And for the soya beans, 0.002, and carrot, cereal grains, poultry meat, strawberry, sunflower seed, banana, soya bean, sorghum, sugarcane, we see that they limit the number of its residue that found in the foodstuff. Well, what is the chemical contaminants or environmental contaminants that may present in the food? Actually, we have a lot, but I will just pick up maybe 5. The first one is methyl mercury, and then PCBs, and then PBDEs. PCBs and PBDEs belongs to the POPs, that persistent organic pollutants. And then bisphenol A or BPA, we are very familiar with this, and also phthalate. Well, we will start with the first one, methyl mercury. Methyl mercury is a toxic form of mercury. It's produced through the bacterial conversion of deposited mercury in water bodies. And according to the Environmental Protection or EPA, methyl mercury is known to be neurotoxic. It means it will interrupt your neural system and has detrimental effects on human development. Fish is the one of the common food sources of the methyl mercury. If we can see here, there is an image in my slide. There we have a mining industry. In the mining industry, there will be a coal plant, also a volcano that will produce a methyl mercury. After that, methyl mercury will enter the water, and after the methyl mercury enters the water, it will comes into the food chain. The food chain will be the shark, pike, albacore, halibut will eat the trout or tuna maybe, and then the trout or tuna will be eat the salmon or polocock or oyster, and then the salmon, polocock, and oyster will eat the krill. So the number of the mercury level will be higher in the bigger fish compared to the small fish. So is it safe to eat a big fish? Of course, when we talk about this, we have to consider the size of the food, the size of the fish itself. Well, we're going to number 2. It's polychlorinated biphenyls, that is usually called as PCBs. What is PCBs? PCBs are chemicals commonly used in industrial application like electrical equipment, flame retardants, and paints. But they are persist. I already mentioned that PCBs belongs to the POPs, persistent organic pollutants. They are already mentioned when we talk about the pathways, right? So if the PCBs also the type of the POPs, so the characteristic will be the same. The characteristic of the PCBs, the first one is lipophilic. Because it's lipophilic, so it can be bioaccumulated, and it also can be stored in the animal tissues. So that's why the common route of exposure to PCBs is through the ingestion or contaminated foodstuffs. Moreover, the highest levels of contaminations have been noted in fish, meat, eggs, and dairy products. Why is this happen? Because our nature is already contaminated with the PCBs, and since they are persistent, it may cause that they will be exist in our nature for a very long time, and they also can transport in a long time and in a long way. So when, for example, when we grow some maybe rice, when we grow a rice that is already the soil already contaminated with this kind of chemicals, of course in the soil this species already exists, and then after that it will enter the rice, and then after that maybe in the transportation and so on, so it will be bioaccumulate because the half lifetime is very long, so it will be different with another kind of the contaminants that we will talk later. So that's why the common route of this exposure is through the ingestion or the contamination foodstuff. Moreover, the highest levels of the contaminations have been noted in, like I mentioned before, fish, meat, eggs, and also lots of dairy products. In this map, we can see that there was cases happens in Japan, Taiwan, and also China. In 1961, the PCBs was found in rice cooking oil. And then in 1979, it means like maybe 10 years later, right? The PCBs was found in rice cooking oil. So it's almost similar. The cases in Japan and the case in Taiwan almost the same. And in China, the highest concentration of the PCBs were discovered in aquatic products, followed by eggs and meat. So they also found the PCBs in the China, like maybe years after the cases happened in Taiwan. So because the contaminated food is similar in Japan and in Taiwan, there was a study that is published in a journal, History of Modern Clinical Toxicology. The title is Chapter 1.10, Japan Uso Poisoning, 1961, and Taiwan Yucheng poisoning 1979. What is the source of the contamination? They found that the source of the contamination is PCB mixture that is found in Canechlor 400 and 500 that was used as the heat transfer medium in the process of deodorization and decolorization of rice oil. We know in making an oil we have to follow step by step, and one of the steps is deodorization in order to remove the unnecessary smell, and also the colorization to make sure the color of the rice oil according to our will, or to according to the producer, right? So the PCB mixer or Canechlor 400 and 500 was used to make those kind of steps, deodorization or also decolorization. So the effect of this contamination is called as Yuzo poisoning and also Yucheng poisoning. The symptoms are acne, pigmentation of the nails and skin, and hypersecretion of the meibomian glands. And after that, they see the long-term effect of this disease, that the PCB's exposure has some effect on female endocrine and also reproductive function, because they made some follow-up study to see what happened to all the citizens that is contaminated with this kind of chemicals, and then they follow up their offspring, and then they found that the PCBs has some effect on female endocrine and reproductive function. If we see here the symptoms of the Yucheng and also Yuzo poisoning, the symptoms is similar, and there are like 5 grades of the symptoms. The first one is the grade 0. The main criteria is abnormal blood level of PCBs without clinical manifestation, and the reference criteria is they are increasing sweating and has the dry skin, pigmentation of lips, gingiva, and mucous membrane of the oral cavity. So this is like the 0 grade. And we're going to the first grade. First grade, there are increasing of the cyst-like discharge from the meibomian gland, and there are pigmentation of the nails. And the next one is the grade. The second grade is a grade 1 plus comedo. And then the reference criteria is the hair follicle keratosis on the extensor side of extremity joints. And the next one is the grade 3. In the grade 3 is the accumulation from the grade 2 plus acneiform eruption, kiss formation of sebaceous gland in the genital area, and evidence of follicular opening in the neck and upper chest. And then the reference criteria is a swelling of the eyelid, swelling and pain also in almost all the joints. And then the last one is enlarged and elevated follicular openings all over the body with extensive acneiform eruption. And the reference criteria is swelling of the face and also the limbs, extensive acne distribution with purulent infection. And we talked about Taiwan before, right? Because these cases happened in 1979 at that time, and the county that's affected by this PCB's exposure or PCB's contaminants were in Taichung, Changhua, Miaoli, and Hsinchu. And if we can see in my slide, we can see that most of the cases happen in Taichung, and then followed by Changhua, Miaoli, and Hsinchu. But what about the grade? The grade also we can see that in Taichung is the highest one with the number 7.48% or around maybe 80%, 80 people at the time. And grade 0 is almost no people or almost zero number in Hsinchu, and grade 4 as well is 0. In Hsinchu we only can found the grade 1 and also the grade 2. Is it also a very small number? It's only 12 people and also 2 people for the grade 2. Well, okay, we're talking to the contaminants number 3, polybrominated diphenyl ethers or PBDEs. And PBD is also a group of persistent organic pollutants. So we already talked before about PCBs. Now the second one is PBDEs. Both PCBs and PBDEs are POPs. So they are persistent organic pollutants. PBDs are also widely distributed in the environment and can be accumulated in the fat tissue. Like we already know that POPs are lipophilic, right? Lipo means lipid. So because they are lipophilic, they can be accumulated in the fat tissue of the various food items such as fish, meats, poultry, dairy products, and even they found these PBDs in human milk. Endocrine disruption has become an area of growing concern due to the potential for long-term effects on the human health, such as alteration in the hormonal balance, developmental problems, and other serious health outcomes. Well, if we can see here, that is the polybrominated diphenyl ethers, as we can see in the figure. We see that PBDEs may come from the soil or waterways, from the air pollution, from indoor air and dust. But also there is another route of exposure that comes from ingestion, and also it may come from the skin contact that cause many effects to mammary glands, ovaries, uterus, thyroid, adipose tissue, pancreas, liver, prostate, and also testes. From this study, we see that PBDEs has been shown to influence glucose metabolism, thyroid and ovarian function, and potentially affect cancer risk. So if we talk about why is the number of cancer is increasing year by year, maybe we should concern about what about food contamination, because food contamination not necessarily talk about are you eating clean or not, because sometimes when you are have a clean eating habit, but where is the source of the food comes from, right? We have to consider about that, because nowadays our soil, our air, our well water already contaminated with this kind of environmental contaminants that may lead to many kinds of diseases. Well, we're going to the next one. We are talking about bisphenol A or BPA. You may familiar with this kind of bottle when maybe you go to a department store or a supermarket, or maybe when you see your own tumbler, your own bottle. You may check, maybe now you may check your own bottle. You can see that is BPA free or not. But for me myself, when I want to buy a bottle or a plastic container, I should consider about this, whether the bottle or the food container is BPA free or not. And usually the BPA free will be stick on on the bottle or on the food packaging. So BPA is an industrial chemical that used to make polycarbonate, a hard and a clear plastic. So the characteristic of BPA is to make a hard and clear plastic. Okay, I want to emphasize that BPA for hard and clear plastic, because later we will talk about the solids that is used also for the plasticizer, so you can understand what is the difference between bisphenol A or BPA and also the solid. And how BPA gets into the food? BPA can leak into food when containers are damaged or heated. So BPA or bisphenol A is very sensitive to the temperature. So I don't think that we will use the plastic bottle for hot water, right? So BPA can leak into food when containers are damaged or heated. And BPA also can leach more easily from polycarbonate bottles into liquids at higher temperatures. That's what I mentioned before. So if we want to bring a hot water, maybe a coffee or a tea, a hot tea, hot chocolate, better to use your own stainless tumbler. Okay, so in this figure we can see the sources of the BPA from the dietary sources and non-dietary sources, and of course we will concern for the dietary sources. In these dietary sources we see that the sources of BPA comes from the food containers or the food packaging, and then from the baby bottles and from the water bottles. That's why there's a lot of study that found in the mineral water that stored in the water in the bottle contain of BPA, and also in the lunch box, also in the water tanks, and the microwave-able utensils. So all the utensils that can be microwave, it's the sources of the bisphenol A. And for the non-dietary sources, we see there's a lot of kind, like from electronic equipment, thermal paper, CD and DVD, and so on. And you know that these dietary sources that we already mentioned, from like food packaging until the microwave-able utensil, baby bottle, water bottle, and so on, it will leach into the landfill. After it leads to the landfill, it may affect the soil and pasture and affect our air, our water. And when we talk it comes to the soil and pasture, it will contaminate it. It will contaminate our poultry, or like chicken, egg, also the animals like a sheep, cow, and so on. And when it's contaminate the water, of course our fish and all of the sea resources or water resources also will be contaminated. And from all these dietary resources, landfill, and our natural resources, it will come to expose the human. So like I said before, that is environmental contaminants are very ubiquitous, so it's almost everywhere. We can find it everywhere, like from ingestion, inhalation, and from dietary sources. And what about the effect of BPA on the reproductive system? So BPA exposure, it can mimic the estrogen activity and binds to estrogen receptors. And after that, there will be a hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, followed by female reproductive system that effect like the PCOS, miscarriage, premature birth, and infertility. I don't know how is the cases in Taiwan, but in my country, in Indonesia, the number of reproductive health, such as reproductive health issues, is increasing. Like the number of PCOS, miscarriage, like premature births, and infertility is very increasing, like maybe for a marriage couple, they are waiting for children, but they don't have children for maybe 5 years after married or 10 years after married, and most of the female are diagnosed with PCOS. And I'm very sure that is also has the uh, link or the connection with the consumptions of products that is stored with BPAs, because in Indonesia we used to have a habit to drink water directly from bottled water. So we will use a dispenser, but the dispenser will be comes from the water bottle. So I don't know, but maybe it can be one of the reason why is the number of PCOS, miscarriage, premature births, and also infertility are increasing in Indonesia. And beside on the female reproductive system, the BPA exposure also cause a problem to a male. So it's not only a female but also a male. For the male, the BPA exposure will be cause the reduction in spermatozoa concentration that may cause the poor sperm quality, and then the retarded testicular development and infertility, and reduced sperm motility. Well, there was a study about survey on the environmental risk of bisphenol A and its relevant regulation in Taiwan, that an environmental endocrine disrupting chemical of increasing concern. So the BPA has been identified as one of the endocrine disruptors or hormonal disruptors, and due to its massive production, like over 700,000 tons per year, and the extensive use of BPA-based plastic like polycarbonate, epoxy resin, it was thus included as a toxic substance by the Ministry of Environment. So in Taiwan, from the study published in 2023, it found that most monitoring data were far below the acceptable risk. So it's good for you guys that the most monitoring data were far below the acceptable risk. However, people may pose an adverse threat to the aquatic environment and human health via ecological and food chain. So like we see before, the route or the pathways of the BPAs, it may comes not only from the food packaging, so we have to concern about another route, like from our resources, our soil, our water, and so on. Well, we will talk about another kinds of plasticizers or chemicals that makes a plastic called phthalates. So this kind of chemicals is one of my study when I was studying my master degree in Taiwan. So I had conducted a research that talks about this phthalates exposure and urinary phthalates metabolites in pregnant women that conducted in Taiwan in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So the phthalates are chemicals, and they are called as phthalate esters that are added to plastic to what? To increase their flexibility, transparency, durability, and longevity. So if we in today's lecture we are talking about two kinds of plasticizer, right? One is BPAs and the second one is phthalates. Can you see the difference between the BPAs and the phthalates? Okay, when we talk about BPAs, it makes the hard plastic. Okay, but if we talk about the phthalates, it makes a flexible, transparent, durable, and longevity plastic. If we see in my figure, we can see here that there are soft plastic, glass, hard plastic, and lean plastic, and also can. also the another slide is B is for the BPS. So we can see the difference between the solids and also the BPS. A is for the solids. We see that the sources is used for soft plastic, hard plastic, lint paper, cans, glass. But for the B is for food preparation, eating, drinking, and also for the storage. Well, what is the effects of solids in human body? So the effects of the solids on human body, it may cause the production and also the secretion in the sex hormones, and also it may cause the inflammation. It may cause the gynecomastia in the males and disruptive spermatogenesis, almost similar like BPAs, and also cause breast, prostate, and testis cancer. So the breast cancer is not only for female, but male also can be a victim. And also for the females, it may cause a menopause, polycystic ovary or PCOS, irregular menstruation, premature ovarian failure, breast and ovary, and also cervix cancer. And another kinds of effects are obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and for the thyroid hormones like production and secretion of the thyroid hormones, autoimmune disease, and allergy, also asthma. So solids may affect all of the organs in our human body. It's not only for the sex hormones or thyroid hormones, but it's also affect the reproductive system, also affects our metabolic system, our autoimmune system, and so on. So, well, we already talk about what is the environmental contaminants. We already see what is the pathways and what is the source and why is this important. So we would like to conclude our today's lectures. The first one is what is the sources and types of the environmental contaminants. Environmental contaminants originate from industrial activities, agricultural practices, and improper waste disposal. And then the second one is the common contaminants include pesticides, heavy metals, and food packaging chemicals. Okay, so when we talk about the pathways of contaminants into the food chains, there are two kinds of the pathways that we already discussing today. The first one is contaminants that enter food through the air, through water, soil exposure, as well as direct contamination that comes from the upstream to the downstream, from the harvesting, right, until the food safe. And bioaccumulation and biomagnification of toxic substances, especially in animal-based foods, that is increase the human exposure. And then what is the health risk of the environmental contaminants in food? There is a long-term exposure to these contaminants that can cause severe health effects such as endocrine disruption, neurotoxicity, reproductive issues. We see that it may cause breast cancer and then testis cancer and so on, and increase of chronic diseases such as cancer. Well, I have some of references that may help you to understand this topic more. So I have a link here. Please kindly check the link for that references if you would like to explore it more. So thank you very much for this class. Hopefully you can understand what we are learning today, and if you have something that you are feeling you need to discuss more, you can contact me in my email risantisitumarang@usu.ac.id. So that's all my explanation for this topic today. See you on the next meeting.